sacrifice your son. Genesis 22:2. Take your son, your only son Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah, and offer him there as a burnt offering. Offer him, your son, as a sacrifice. That's what God commanded Abraham, and that directly contradicts Exodus 20:13. You shall not murder. Murder is forbidden, always has been. Genesis 9:6. Whoever sheds the blood of man, by man shall his blood be shed, for God made man in his own image. Don't kill. That's the rule. But God told Abraham, kill your son. And Abraham obeyed. Verse 3. So Abraham rose early in the morning, saddled his donkey, and took 2 of his young men with him, and his son Isaac. He didn't argue, didn't question, didn't delay. He went. And verse 9-10. They came to the place of which God had told him, and Abraham built the altar there, and laid the wood in order, and bound Isaac his son, and laid him on the altar, on top of the wood. Then Abraham reached out his hand, and took the knife to slaughter his son. To slaughter. He was going to do it. And God stopped him. Verse 11-12. But the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven, and said, Abraham, Abraham. And he said, Here I am. He said, Do not lay your hand on the boy, or do anything to him. For now I know that you fear God, seeing you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me. Do not. God stopped it. But why command it in the first place? Because God was testing, not Abraham's willingness to murder, but his willingness to obey, even when it made no sense, even when it contradicted everything he knew, even when it meant losing the promise, because Isaac was the son of promise. Genesis 21:12. Through Isaac shall your offspring be named. Through Isaac. And if Isaac dies, the promise dies. But Abraham believed. Hebrews 11:19. He considered that God was able even to raise him from the dead. Able to resurrect. So Abraham obeyed. Fully. Completely. And God provided. Verse 13. And Abraham lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, behind him was a ram, caught in a thicket by his horns. And Abraham went and took the ram, and offered it up as a burnt offering instead of his son. Instead of. That's substitution. That's the gospel. And that's why God broke his rule. Not because murder is okay, but because he was prophesying, showing that one day he would provide the ultimate substitute, his own son, who would die, not instead of Isaac, instead of you. John 1:29. Behold, the Lamb of God, who takes away the sin of the world. The Lamb, provided by God. So God didn't break his rule. He fulfilled it by providing the sacrifice and showing that obedience matters more than understanding. Heal on Sabbath. Mark 3:5. Jesus entered the synagogue, and a man was there with a withered hand, and the Pharisees watched him to see if he would heal on the Sabbath, so they could accuse him. And Jesus knew. Verse 4. And he said to them, Is it lawful on the Sabbath to do good or to do harm, to save life or to kill? But they were silent. Silent. Because the law was clear. Exodus 20:8-10. Remember the Sabbath day, to keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the 7th day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work. No work. That was the rule. And healing was considered work. The Pharisees had 39 categories of prohibited Sabbath work, and healing violated multiple categories. But Jesus didn't care. Verse 5. And he looked around at them with anger, grieved at their hardness of heart, and said to the man, Stretch out your hand. He stretched it out, and his hand was restored. Restored on the Sabbath. And the Pharisees were furious. Verse 6. The Pharisees went out and immediately held counsel with the Herodians against him, how to destroy him. Destroy him. For healing. On the Sabbath. But here's what they missed. Jesus wasn't breaking the Sabbath. He was fulfilling it. Because the Sabbath was made for rest, for restoration, for wholeness. And what's more restful than being healed? And Jesus said in Mark 2:27-28, "The Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. So the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath." Lord of the Sabbath. That means he made it. He owns it. He defines it. And if healing on the Sabbath is breaking the rule, then the rule was misunderstood. Because God never intended the Sabbath to prevent good. Isaiah 58:13-14 describes the true Sabbath. Not legalism, but delight in the Lord. And Jesus healed on the Sabbath repeatedly. John 5:9, the man at the pool. John 9:14, the man born blind. Luke 13:14, the woman bent over for 18 years. Every time the Pharisees raged. Every time Jesus did it anyway. Why? Because mercy triumphs over sacrifice. Matthew 12:7. And if you had known what this means, I desire mercy and not sacrifice, you would not have condemned the guiltless. Guiltless. Jesus wasn't breaking the Sabbath. He was restoring it to what God intended. A day of mercy, not legalism. So God didn't break his rule. He revealed its purpose and showed that love is greater than law. Rahab's lie. Joshua 2:4-6. But the woman had taken the 2 men and hidden them. And she said, "True, the men came to me, but I did not know where they were from. And when the gate was about to be closed at dark, the men went out. I do not know where the men went. Pursue them quickly, for you will overtake them." But she had brought them up to the roof and hid them with the stalks of flax that she had laid in order on the roof. She lied, directly, deliberately. The spies came. She hid them, and when the king's men asked, she said, "They left. Go chase them." That's a lie. And lying is sin. Exodus 20:116. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. Don't lie. That's the rule. Proverbs 12:22. Lying lips are an abomination to the Lord. Abomination. That's strong language. And yet, Hebrews 11:31. By faith, Rahab, the prostitute, did not perish with those who were disobedient, because she had given a friendly welcome to the spies. By faith, she's in the Hall of Fame. Hebrews 11, and James 2:25. And in the same way was not also Rahab the prostitute justified by works when she received the messengers and sent them out by another way? Justified, not condemned. Justified. For lying. How? Because her lie saved lives. Joshua 6:25. But Rahab the prostitute and her father's household and all who belonged to her, Joshua saved alive. And she has lived in Israel to this day, because she hid the messengers whom Joshua sent to spy out Jericho. Saved alive. And not just her. The spies, the mission, the conquest. All of it depended on her lie. And God honored it. But wait, does that mean lying is okay? No. Lying is still sin. But here's what God was showing. His law serves his purpose. And when the law conflicts with preserving life, life wins. Because the law was made for life, not death. And Rahab chose life over law. And God honored that, because mercy triumphs over judgment. James 2:13. So did God break his rule? No. He showed that the purpose of the rule is greater than the letter of the rule. And when protecting the innocent requires deception, God judges the heart, not the method. So Rahab lied and was blessed, not because lying is good, but because saving lives is better. David ate showbread. 1 Samuel 21:6. So the priest gave him the holy bread, for there was no bread there but the bread of the presence, which is removed from before the Lord, to be replaced by hot bread on the day it is taken away. Holy bread, the bread of the presence, reserved for priests. Leviticus 24:9. And it shall be for Aaron and his sons, and they shall eat it in a holy place, since it is for him a most holy portion out of the Lord's food offerings, a perpetual due. For Aaron and his sons. Priests only. That's the rule. And David wasn't a priest. He was from Judah, not Levi. And he ate it, and gave it to his men. Verse 4-5. And nothing happened. No judgment, no punishment, no rebuke. Why? Because David was hungry. And the priest recognized mercy over ritual, life over law. And Jesus referenced this. Matthew 12:3-4. He said to them, "Have you not read what David did when he was hungry, and those who were with him, how he entered the house of God and ate the bread of the presence, which it was not lawful for him to eat, nor for those who were with him, but only for the priests? Not lawful, but justified." Why? Verse 7. And if you had known what this means, I desire mercy and not sacrifice, you would not have condemned the guiltless. Guiltless. David broke the law. But he was guiltless. How? Because need supersedes ritual. Life matters more than ceremony. And God cares more about the heart than the rule. 1 Samuel 16:7. For the Lord sees not as man sees. Man looks on the outward appearance, but the Lord looks on the heart. The heart. David's heart was right. His need was real. And the priest acted with mercy. And God approved. So did God break his rule? No. He showed that ceremonial law serves people, not the other way around. Mark 2:27. The Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. Same principle. The law was made to serve, to protect, to guide, not to starve, not to kill, not to condemn the innocent. So when the law would harm the righteous, mercy steps in. And that's not breaking the rule. That's fulfilling its purpose. Marry a prostitute. Hosea 1:2. When the Lord first spoke through Hosea, the Lord said to Hosea, "Go, take to yourself a wife of whoredom and have children of whoredom, for the land commits great whoredom by forsaking the Lord." Take a wife of whoredom, a prostitute. That's what God commanded, and that contradicts everything. Deuteronomy 23:17. None of the daughters of Israel shall be a cult prostitute, and none of the sons of Israel shall be a cult prostitute. No prostitution. That's the rule. And marrying one, that defiles you. Leviticus 21:7. Priests couldn't marry prostitutes. It was forbidden. And yet God told Hosea, a prophet, to do exactly that. And Hosea obeyed. Verse 3. So he went and took Gomer, the daughter of Diblaim, and she conceived and bore him a son. He married her, had children with her, and she was unfaithful. Verse 2. Children of whoredom, because she kept cheating, and Hosea kept taking her back. Chapter 3:1. And the Lord said to me, "Go again, love a woman who is loved by another man and is an adulteress, even as the Lord loves the children of Israel, though they turn to other gods." Go again. Love her, even though she's an adulteress. Why? Because Hosea's marriage was a living parable of God's relationship with Israel. They were unfaithful, constantly, repeatedly, shamelessly, and God kept pursuing, kept loving, kept forgiving. And Hosea's pain, that was God's pain. And Hosea's forgiveness, that was God's grace. So did God break his rule? No. He used it to teach, to show, to reveal his heart. Because the law says, don't marry a prostitute. But grace says, love the unlovable. Pursue the unfaithful. Redeem the broken. And that's what God does. Romans 5:8. But God shows his love for us in that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. While. Not after. While. So Hosea married Gomer, not because prostitution is okay, but because redemption is possible. And God's love pursues, even when it costs everything. Touch the leper, Matthew 8:2-3. And behold, a leper came to him and knelt before him, saying, Lord, if you will, you can make me clean. And Jesus stretched out his hand and touched him, saying, I will, be clean. And immediately his leprosy was cleansed. Touched him, a leper, and that was forbidden. Leviticus 13:45-46. The leprous person who has the disease shall wear torn clothes and let the hair of his head hang loose, and he shall cover his upper lip and cry out, Unclean, unclean. He shall remain unclean as long as he has the disease. He is unclean. He shall live alone. His dwelling shall be outside the camp. Outside the camp. That means isolated, quarantined, untouchable. And if you touched a leper, you became unclean. Leviticus 5:3. Or if he touches human uncleanness, of whatever sort the uncleanness may be, with which one becomes unclean, and it is hidden from him, when he comes to know it and realizes his guilt, you're guilty, unclean, and you need purification. That's the law. But Jesus touched deliberately, intentionally, and instead of becoming unclean, the leper became clean. Because when holiness touches uncleanness, holiness wins, not the other way around. And that's the gospel. We're the lepers. Isaiah 64:6. We have all become like one who is unclean, and all our righteous deeds are like a polluted garment. Polluted, unclean, untouchable. And Jesus touched us, not with a hand, with his blood. And instead of becoming unclean, he made us clean. 1 John 1:7. The blood of Jesus, his son, cleanses us from all sin. Cleanses. That's healing. That's restoration. That's what happens when Jesus touches the untouchable. So did God break his rule? No. He showed that the rule was temporary, pointing to the one who would come and make all things clean. Not by avoiding contamination, but by conquering it. So Jesus touched lepers. Repeatedly. Luke 17:12-14. 10 lepers, all healed. Because touch communicates love, acceptance, worth. And that's what God does. He doesn't avoid the unclean. He enters it. John 1:14. And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. Dwelt. Tabernacled, moved in to our contaminated world, and made us clean by his presence. Eat unclean animals. Acts 10:13-15. And there came a voice to him, Rise, Peter, kill and eat. But Peter said, By no means, Lord, for I have never eaten anything that is common or unclean. And the voice came to him again a second time, What God has made clean, do not call common. Kill and eat. Unclean animals. That was the command. And Peter refused. By no means, Lord, because the law was clear. Leviticus 11:4-8. Don't eat camels, rabbits, pigs, or anything that doesn't have fins and scales. That's the rule. And Peter had obeyed his whole life. Verse 14. I have never eaten anything that is common or unclean. Never. But God said, What I have made clean, don't call common. Verse 15. And this happened 3 times. Verse 16. Why? Because God was changing the rules, not arbitrarily, but because Jesus fulfilled the law. Matthew 5:17. Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. Fulfill. That means complete, accomplish, bring to its intended purpose. And the dietary laws, they were about separation, holiness, being set apart. But Jesus broke down the wall. Ephesians 2:14. For he himself is our peace, who has made us both one and has broken down in his flesh the dividing wall of hostility. The wall between Jew and Gentile, clean and unclean, us and them. And when Jesus died, the dietary laws ended. Mark 7:19. Thus he declared all foods clean. All foods clean. So Peter's vision wasn't God breaking his rule. It was God declaring the rule fulfilled and showing that the gospel is for everyone, not just Jews. Gentiles too. Acts 10:34-35. Truly I understand that God shows no partiality, but in every nation, anyone who fears him and does what is right is acceptable to him. Acceptable. Not based on diet, based on faith. So God didn't break his rule. He fulfilled it and opened the door to all nations through the blood of Jesus, who makes all things clean. Sun stands still. Joshua 10:12-13. At that time, Joshua spoke to the Lord in the day when the Lord gave the Amorites over to the sons of Israel. And he said in the sight of Israel, Sun, stand still at Gibeon, and moon in the valley of Ajalon. And the sun stood still, and the moon stopped, until the nation took vengeance on their enemies. The sun stopped in the midst of heaven, and did not hurry to set for about a whole day. The sun stood still for a whole day. That breaks the laws of physics, the laws of nature, the laws God established. Genesis 1:14-18. God created the sun and moon to mark seasons, days, and years. That's the order, the rhythm, the rule. And God stopped it. Why? Because Israel needed more time to defeat their enemies. Verse 10. And the Lord threw them into a panic before Israel, who struck them with a great blow. But it wasn't enough. They needed daylight to finish the job. And Joshua prayed, and God answered by stopping the sun. And here's what this shows. God is sovereign over his creation. Psalm 115:3. Our God is in the heavens. He does all that he pleases. All. That includes overriding natural law. Because natural law isn't autonomous. It's not independent. It's sustained by God. Colossians 1:17. And he is before all things, and in him all things hold together. Hold together. That means the laws of physics only work because God sustains them. And if he chooses to suspend them, he can. Because he's the creator, not the creation. And this wasn't the only time. 2 Kings 20:11. God made the sun go backward. Isaiah 38:8. For Hezekiah, 10 steps backward on the sundial. Why? To give a sign, to confirm a promise, to show his power. And it worked. So did God break his rule? No. He demonstrated his authority over it, because the rules of nature serve God's purposes, not the other way around. And when his purposes require a miracle, he delivers. Matthew 19:26. With God, all things are possible. All things, including stopping the sun. So trust him, not the rules, because he made the rules, and he can change them, when necessary, for his glory and your good. David lives. 2 Samuel 12:13. David said to Nathan, I have sinned against the Lord. And Nathan said to David, the Lord also has put away your sin. You shall not die. You shall not die. But the law said otherwise. Leviticus 20:10. If a man commits adultery with the wife of another man, both the adulterer and the adulteress shall surely be put to death. Surely die. That's the rule. And David committed adultery with Bathsheba. 2 Samuel 11:4. And worse, he murdered her husband. Verse 15. Set Uriah in the forefront of the hardest fighting, and then draw back from him, that he may be struck down and die. Murdered, premeditated, cold-blooded. And the law said, Numbers 35:31. You shall accept no ransom for the life of a murderer, who is guilty of death, but he shall be put to death. Shall be put to death. No exceptions. No mercy. No pardon. And yet, Nathan said, you shall not die. Why? Because of grace. Undeserved. Unearned. Unmerited favor. David deserved death. But God gave mercy. Why? Not because David was special, but because God is merciful. Exodus 34:6-7. The Lord, a God merciful and gracious, slow to anger, and abounding in steadfast love and faithfulness, keeping steadfast love for thousands, forgiving iniquity and transgression and sin, but who will by no means clear the guilty? By no means clear the guilty. So how was David cleared? Because someone else paid, not immediately, but prophetically. The child died. Verse 18. On the seventh day, the child died. Innocent, blameless, and he died in David's place. That's substitution. And it points forward to the ultimate innocent, Jesus, who died for the guilty. 2 Corinthians 5:21. For our sake he made him to be sin, who knew no sin, so that in him we might become the righteousness of God. Made sin. For us. So we wouldn't die. So God didn't break his rule. He fulfilled it by providing a substitute. The law demands death. Romans 6:23. The wages of sin is death, but grace provides life through the death of another. And David lived, not because God ignored justice, but because mercy triumphed. James 2:13. And one day the full payment would be made at the cross, where Jesus died, so sinners could live. Woman caught adultery. John 8:4-11. They said to him, Teacher, this woman has been caught in the act of adultery. Now, in the law, Moses commanded us to stone such women. So what do you say? Jesus bent down and wrote with his finger on the ground. And as they continued to ask him, he stood up and said to them, Let him who is without sin among you be the first to throw a stone at her. And once more he bent down and wrote on the ground. But when they heard it, they went away, one by one, beginning with the older ones, and Jesus was left alone with the woman standing before him. Jesus stood up and said to her, Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you? She said, No one, Lord. And Jesus said, Neither do I condemn you. Go, and from now on, sin no more. Neither do I condemn you. But the law demanded it. Leviticus 20:10. If a man commits adultery with the wife of another man, both the adulterer and the adulteress shall surely be put to death. Both. That means the man too. And where was he? Verse 4. Caught in the act. That means they saw both, but they only brought her. Hypocrites. And Jesus exposed them. Let him who is without sin cast the first stone. Verse 7. And they all left, because they were all guilty. Romans 3:23. For all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. All. No exceptions. So no one could throw. And the woman stood there, guilty, condemned by law, but freed by grace. Neither do I condemn you. Why? Because Jesus would take her condemnation. Romans 8:1. There is therefore now no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus. No condemnation, not because sin doesn't matter, but because Jesus paid. He became her substitute, her sacrifice, her atonement. And he told her, Go and sin no more. That's not just forgiveness. That's transformation. Grace doesn't excuse sin. It empowers you to stop. Titus 2:11-12. For the grace of God has appeared, bringing salvation for all people, training us to renounce ungodliness and worldly passions, and to live self-controlled, upright, and godly lives. Training. That's what grace does. So did God break his rule? No. He delayed judgment, so he could execute it fully, on himself, at the cross, where Jesus was condemned, so the adulteress could go free. And that's the gospel. We're all caught in sin, in guilt, in shame. And Jesus says, Neither do I condemn you. Not because we're innocent, but because he took the condemnation. Isaiah 53:5. But he was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. Pierced, crushed, for us. So we could go and sin no more. 10 times. God appeared to break his own rules, commanding Abraham to sacrifice Isaac. Jesus healing on the Sabbath. Rahab lying and being blessed. David eating showbread. Hosea marrying a prostitute. Jesus touching lepers. Peter eating unclean animals, the sun standing still, David living after adultery and murder, the adulteress walking free. And every single time, it wasn't God breaking his rules. It was God revealing something deeper: his sovereignty, his grace, his mercy, his purpose. Because here's the truth: God's rules serve his purposes, not the other way around. The law was given to show us our need. Romans 3:20. For by works of the law, no human being will be justified in his sight, since through the law comes knowledge of sin. Knowledge of sin. That's the purpose. Not salvation, but conviction. So we'd see. We're sinners, desperate, hopeless, without him. And then grace comes and fulfills what the law demanded. Romans 8:3-4. For God has done what the law, weakened by the flesh, could not do. By sending his own Son in the likeness of sinful flesh, and for sin, he condemned sin in the flesh, in order that the righteous requirement of the law might be fulfilled in us. Fulfilled, not abolished, fulfilled by Jesus, who kept every rule perfectly and then died, taking our penalty, so we could live free, forgiven, transformed. So God didn't break his rules. He fulfilled them in Jesus, who said Matthew 5:17, do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. Fulfill. That's the key. Every broken rule was fulfilled. Every exception proved the greater principle: mercy over sacrifice, life over law, grace over condemnation. And all of it points to the cross, where Jesus broke, so the rules could be kept, where he died, so we could live, where he was condemned, so we could be free. That's the gospel. Not God breaking his rules, but God keeping them perfectly through his Son, who took the punishment and gave us the reward. So don't see these as contradictions. See them as revelations of a God who is both just and merciful, holy and gracious, righteous and forgiving, and who did whatever it took, even appearing to break his own rules to save you, because you matter more than the rule, and grace matters more than law. And love fulfills it all. Romans 13:10. Love does no wrong to a neighbor. Therefore love is the fulfilling of the law. Love. That's what every broken rule reveals. A God who loves, enough to sacrifice, to override, to intervene, to save. So trust him, even when he doesn't make sense, because he's not breaking the rules. He's fulfilling them in ways you can't imagine, for purposes greater than you can see. And it all leads to one place: the cross, where the greatest rule breaking happened. God died, but not really breaking, fulfilling every promise, every prophecy, every law in the person of Jesus, who is the end of the law, Romans 10:4, and the beginning of grace for everyone who believes.